Even more commits. No, not for KU basketball. KU football, Naquane Carter, as well as Robert Reddick, add to the class of 2026 for KU, which is up to 18 commits now, and it is the best you could argue since at least 2010.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of the show, we're talking a little KU football, who's now up to 18 commits, and I'm going to tell you why you can make the argument this is the best class the KU football has ever had since they've been tracking that sort of thing. Naquane Carter and Robert Reddick are the two commits. We're going to break down their games as well, get into their scouting reports and the future position rooms for both of them on the defensive side of the football for KU. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for half off, 50% off your first year with Monarch Money. All right, we're going to start right here where we have the breaking news, KU's two newest commits. They also lost a commit, but the class still overall looking very good for KU. Now, the first commit that happened that we touched on a little bit yesterday, breaking down more today, this was on June 15th, Naquane Carter, who posted on social media saying, 1,000% committed. I want to say I'm so blessed, and I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who has stuck with me through everything. I'm proud to say I'm a Jayhawk. Isaiah 43:19 rock chalk with a fancy schmancy graphic on his social media page about committing to KU. The other one, Robert Reddick, he just commits today, this afternoon, so that one fresh, hot off the presses to give KU their second commit in just a few day span. Now, the commit they lost was Landen Anderson, who is a 6'3", 275-pound defensive lineman, and that is a big loss for KU. So specifically with Carter. Carter is a 6'1", 270-pound defensive tackle. He picked Kansas from Moore, Oklahoma, Southmore High School, three-star recruit, over Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, North Texas, and more. He joins the class on the 24/7 composite as a top 700 recruit overall. And the only recruits rated ahead of him in the 24/7 sports composite in this class for KU are Hunter Higgins, Caden Snyder, Corey Amakri, and J.J. Dunnigan. So he becomes the fifth highest rated player by the 24/7 composite in the class for KU. Pretty impressive stuff for what he is bringing to the table. The next commit that you got today was, again, Robert Reddick. And Reddick is a 6'2", 170-pound safety from Indianapolis, Indiana, went to Ben Davis, or I guess goes to, he still has another year of high school, Ben Davis High School. He's a three-star as well. His offer list more would indicate that Kansas thinks they found a diamond in the rough here. His offers are Toledo, Bowling Green, Miami of Ohio, so some of the better MAC schools. And then Illinois, there is one there from the Power 5 level, three-star recruit, and he joins the class as the lowest ranked player in the class. But again, Kansas, if they feel like they found a diamond in the rough and they feel like somebody that they can develop and fits an archetype, then I think you just kind of trust Lance Leipold and the staff to do just that. Now, the bad news, again, is that Landen Anderson is gone from the class, and he's probably the best player among the three here. But, sometimes there's only so much you can control. Anderson, 6'3", 275-pound defensive lineman. He was an 88 rated three-star by 24/7. He was a .8828 on the 24/7 sports composite, which put him in the same, he put him at the time fifth for the KU class, which is where Carter is now, but he was rated higher than Carter. So the distance was a little bit more there. And he was rated 532 on the composite. Carter, for instance, is just inside the top 700. But Anderson is also one of those guys who is like, when you watch him and you see the kind of freaky athleticism he had for the size, you could have seen him jumping a lot higher in recruiting rankings at some point in time. So it is unfortunate you lose him, but it is nice that you have Carter to come in and kind of backfill that spot that you lost. And it just seemed like in the case of Anderson, he was interested in taking visits to other schools. And that's something that, with Lance Leipold, they're like, hey, listen, you don't have to commit, but if you do commit, like mean it, like commit to our school, commit to our program. And so with Anderson, the fact that, okay, he committed and then maybe you're visiting other schools, like that's going to kind of be a no-no. And I appreciate like Lance Leipold having, set boundaries for that sort of thing. And to where, if you're Landon Anderson, maybe you want to kind of shop yourself around. Well, if that was always going to be the case, then would Anderson have come into KU, redshirted a year, and then been like, I'm gone, I'm going to go to the highest bidder? I don't know. So it probably works out long-term for both parties in the end. Like maybe he can find the better suiting party at that point. For Kansas, again, they found a very suitable replacement in the class. I don't know. Maybe they would have taken Carter and Anderson, but at the very least, it was nice that you do end up with Carter in the class as well as kind of a defensive tackle, whereas Reddick is more of a cornerback, safety, DB type of hybrid. That I guess you would mention there. But now overall, you look at the class of 2026 for KU, and it is rocking for Lance Leipold and the Jayhawks here in Lawrence because, as I mentioned, at least since they've been tracking this stuff, you could make the argument this is the best class that Kansas football has ever had. Now, you got to finish it out. You got to keep it together. You got to hope that, certain guys maintain their recruiting ranking, meaning they have good senior years of high school, or that, other players actually get better and rise in their rankings. And obviously there's still players that KU is still trying to vie for their services and trying to get more commits in the class, right? So it's just based on right now. It doesn't guarantee it's going to finish this way, but you go back and take a look at the 24/7 sports recruiting era, which goes back to 2010. This class right now is 18 commits, which would be the most signees of any high school class of the Lance Leipold era. But as of right now, in the 24/7 sports composite, Kansas has 4 commits who are ranked in the top 500 of the 24/7 sports composite. The most ever that Kansas has had in a class before this year was when they got 4 in 2010 with Turner Gill. And that was when they brought in 24 commits. So you're bringing in 4 of 18. That's even tougher to do than 4 of 24. The most they've previously done in the Lance Leipold era is 3. That was in the class of 2024. They did 0 in 22, 0 in 23, 1 in 25. So they've done 4 in the previous, 4 classes combined, 4 right now in this class. That is how good of a class this is right now for Lance Leipold and company. If we stretch it a little further and we say top 800 in the 24/7 sports composite, they have 9 commits right now in the top 800. So basically half their commits are top 800 on the 24/7 sports composite. The most that Kansas ever had in the top 800 in a class previously, right now it would be the 9, was 8, also in 2010 with Turner Gill. Again, that's 8 of 24. This year they have even more with 6 less commits in total. Second most was 7, 2011 with Turner Gill, tied by the class of 2024 with Lance Leipold when they got 7. That's another cool thing though about this. It's not just that how good this class is, it's that you're compounding, you're stacking classes, right? So if you combine the 9 they have committed this year with the 5 top 800 commits from 2025, again, according to the 24/7 composite, and the 7 they had in 2024. And again, some of these guys end up transferring away like a DJ Warner, but that gives you 21 players who were top 800 over these last 3 cycles for KU in the 24/7 composite era. Like if I just take a random 3-year stretch, let's look at a random, Charlie Weiss to David Beatty, 2014 to 2016. So 1 year of Weiss and 2 years of David Beatty. That's 8 total players in that situation. So like you can see the talent pool going up in an immense way, in a severe way. And again, if we expand it out, top 1,000 commits, 12 of the 18 commits are top 1,000 in the 24/7 sports composite. The most they've ever gotten was 13, 2011 with Turner Gill. That had 32 commits. So if you're looking at it as a percentage of how many of your commits, not just the quantity, you're looking at the quality of commits, the percentage of commits that KU has right now in the class of 2026 that are top 1,000 commits, it's 2 in every 3. It's 67%. The previous high for a class by KU before Lance Leipold took over, you have to go back to the Turner Gill days when they brought in 40% of the class were top 1,000 commits in 2011. Prior to that, it would have been the 33% of Turner Gill in 2010. If you're looking at non-Turner Gill numbers, it would be Charlie Weiss in 2014 when they brought in 27%. In the Lance Leipold era, 2020 class of 2023, 43% of their commits were top 1,000. 2024, 52.9% were top 1,000. 2025, 53.3% were top 1,000. And right now this year, 67%. This is an unbelievable job by Lance Leipold and staff to recruit and what they are building here in Lawrence. And they still have room and more area that they could probably add some other big-time commits to make this class even better, which would be pretty cool. But they're in a pretty good spot right now as long as they can keep this retained and move forward into the fall and keep everybody happy. All right, let's get to the scouting reports of the specific players that they brought in with Carter and Reddick, and the future looks at the position groups for both those players. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. They have easy collaboration too. Managing money with your partner, right? That can sometimes cause a conflict in a marriage. Well, this is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year with Monarch Money. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks and making the show your first listen every day. Don't forget you check out Locked on College Football or Locked on College Basketball for your second listen every day. All right, let's get into the scouting reports. Naquane Carter and Robert Reddick. Let's start with Carter. So 24/7 Sports lists him at 6'1", 270 pounds. Rivals has him at 6'3", 260. That seems like a big difference. Not as much in the weight, but certainly in the height, right? Like, being a 6'1" defensive lineman versus 6'3", that's a very different, outcome for where you should be rated, which is funny because you would think, okay, if Rivals thinks he's 6'3" and 24/7 thinks he's 6'1", you would think Rivals, he would be rated super high and maybe higher. He's a 5.7 3-star at Rivals, so it's like kind of a middle tier 3-star, which is the same for On3, but 24/7 likes him even more, 87 graded 3-star over at 24/7. So overall, the composite 0.8759 mentioned he is the number 5 player now in the class of commits for KU. He's a top 15 player in Oklahoma. He's a top 80 defensive lineman in the country and top 700 overall in the composite for the class of 2026. He also wrestles in high school, which is not the be-all end-all and everything, but I always like guys who are like almost like cross-trained in different sports. I think you can learn a lot from playing other sports, and it keeps you from burning out and maybe overdoing something in a specific sport, but also those skills you can learn. I love it when you see linemen or like linebackers who were wrestlers in high school, and I think that teaches you just a lot of different ways of maybe maneuvering out of blocks or getting into favorable or getting out of unfavorable situations and positions. So I kind of just like to see that. I don't know. But when watching the highlights on Carter, really quick jump off the line of scrimmage. That's what immediately stood out to me. Like, really good at just shooting straight into gaps, especially in the running game. Shed blocks really quickly. Just looked like he was a menace in the backfield in terms of, stopping the run, getting tackles for loss. Really good at kind of like, I don't know, side swiping off the blocker, like whatever you want to call that. I don't know if it was like a swim move or if it's just side swiping off or just jumping the gap like that quick that you're kind of just getting in there and then scraping to where the running back is. Just seemed to be overall like a really good run defender. And he's not, he is a defense lineman. He's not as fast as a safety or a linebacker, but he certainly like pursues like a linebacker when he's going for that running back. Like, he has a really good, I don't know if it's like the angles that he takes or just the pursuant that he has is really good. Seemed to have a good motor, seemed to hustle to the ball. I will say you didn't really see any pass rush stuff on the highlights, which maybe it's in there in more of a game setting, but typically if you're having a good pass rush, that's going to be on your highlights. So maybe he's more of a run defender than a pass rusher, but that can be okay. If you're a defensive tackle, we know, your bigger impact is going to be on the run, whereas your edge rushers are going to be more of the rusher. And I also find it interesting because of the fact that Again, 6'1 or 6'3, whatever, 260, 270. I think he profiles to being a D tackle in a 4-3 scheme. But let's say Kansas did want to play a 3-down lineman scheme in the future, which is something Iowa State sometimes plays where, they've gone, which I bring it up because DK McDonald obviously was previously at Iowa State, where at times Iowa State might play a 3-3-5 or a 3-2-6, right? And if you do end up eventually down the road, like this year, you don't want to because of the current personnel. But if you're recruiting for the future to eventually move to a 3-down lineman situation, you could use him as a defensive end in a 3-man front. So you kind of have versatility with how you want to use him. Now, as far as Robert Reddick goes, versatility could be the name of the game here too, because On 3 and Rivals actually lists him as a corner, while 24/7 Sports lists him as a safety. And he's listed at 6'2" on all three main sites, which is good size for a DB, between 165 to 170 pounds, which KU has obviously, breaded their butter with like corners who are a little more undersized weight wise with like Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson. And they've been very, very productive, good players for KU. So maybe you would just view him in the position group of a defensive back if we're just, being less specific. I tend to, when I see a guy 6'2", like I usually lean toward the side that he's going to be a safety, but maybe you give him a try at both and just see whatever works out for you in one way or another. He is a 5.5 rated 3-star Rivals, 84 rated 3-star 24/7. So again, this is somebody where based on the offers and the ratings, this is somebody more that makes me think KU either really like the archetype and or think he's a diamond in the rough, which I'm not betting against this staff if that's kind of what they're thinking on someone. And so you're kind of taking a chance in that way, especially when you already have, 17, 18 commits. Maybe you can take a bigger swing on a player that you think is underrated, right? Like maybe this is KU planting their flag saying, no, those recruiting sites are wrong. We think he's way better than that. And again, I would trust, how this staff has done with developing players and finding diamonds in the rough for that specific thing. What I find is, again, going back to DK McDonald, his roots with Iowa State and some of the stuff they've done, you look at a lot of the Iowa State DBs, they're taller players, right? Like they're lengthy players. And that comes in either way. Like they've had that at the corner position, but they've really had that at the safety position, especially when they're playing three safeties, right? And so if you're playing that third safety, it really behooves you you think about Reddick being possibly like that third safety who's got a 6'2" frame where he doesn't mind to come up and hit you, but he can also play a little bit like a corner in coverage. That could be the idea of what they're going for, that they're saying, yeah, this guy would be a perfect scheme fit. I think in watching the tape, sometimes gets a little handsy as a corner. Maybe a little inconsistent at times at the line of scrimmage, but like he shows really good closing skills, which is an excellent skill for a corner to have. And I would almost view that, I'm sure Kansas views it this way. Like if you do think, okay, maybe he's a little handsy here, like, I don't know, Kobe and Melo at times were a little handsy, and it's almost just like, you're going to be like, okay, maybe they'll call one pass interference against me in a game, but like for the most part, like I'm going to win. Like we saw L'Jarius Sneed be awesome with the Chiefs, and like he was one of the leaders in the NFL in pass interferences, but it was like they're not going to call like 5 of them on him a game. Like it's actually an okay strategy, and I'm sure Kansas views it as like I said, they can teach up the line of scrimmage stuff. You can't teach the good closing skills. You can't teach the good ball skills. He also plays receiver. You can't teach the 6'2" frame. And again, like I said, like you seem to be a willing tackler, seem to be a solid tackler, that I think you're going to have versatile options of what you can do with him. So I do see the vision here for Lance Leipold and company of why they brought on Robert Reddick and what he could potentially be down the road for KU. So let's talk about those positions: corner, safety, defensive line, where they could possibly fit in down the road. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the show. Again, don't forget you can make Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball your second listen every day. Let's start with the defensive line, looking at the future position rooms for both these players. Obviously, you have all the commits that are coming in the class of 2026 for KU that are joining them. If we just stick with the idea that KU would be playing a 4-man front moving forward as far as Carter goes, then you're looking at him, being a defensive tackle at that point in time. And so in 2025, I really like this defensive tackle group for KU, but there's a lot of players that are going to be graduating. DJ Withers, Tommy Dunn, Gage Keys, Keenan Caldwell, they're all seniors. Now, I do think there's a possibility Keys could get another year. I thought I saw that somewhere. Maybe that ends up happening. But, let's say it doesn't. You're talking about losing 3 or 4 players let's just say 4 from the defensive line. I like what Blake Harrell brings to the table. He'd be a redshirt junior. I mean, I think he'll be good this year as a redshirt sophomore. He was good last year as a redshirt freshman. So you go into 2026 and you say, okay, Harrell, incumbent starter. And then at that point, it's like, okay, did Marcus Calvin make enough steps forward this year as a redshirt junior that you could pencil him in? What about Josiah Hammond? Is he going to redshirt this year? Where would he fit in? Do you add any transfers into the program? But I think you look at the ideal path of what I think Kansas wants to do is redshirt an incoming lineman, just in general, offensive or defensive, because you want to add weight. You want to get the right weight. You want to get them muscular. You want to get them ready for Big 12 football. And that's what we saw with Blake Harrell, where it was like he redshirted his first year, and Harrell wasn't the highest rated recruit in the world either. Redshirted him his first year, and he was ready to go last year as a redshirt freshman. And again, like there were certain games where he was KU's best defensive tackle. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, you could say the sky's the limit for a good defensive tackle. You come in, you redshirt your first year, you could be playing, especially knowing that KU and Jim Panagos, they will rotate. If they have 7 good ones, they'll play 7. If they have 5 good ones, they'll play 5. To where Carter has the opportunity, you probably redshirt in year 1, and then you could get on the field as soon as redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore year. Like you could get on the field that early if you are Carter, even at a position where sometimes it does take some time around the country. So that's got to be encouraging for a young player to kind of look up to. And then as far as when you're looking at Reddick, I mean, the corner room has a lot of young players right now for KU, but by the time he arrives on campus, a lot of those young players will be in their 3rd or 4th year at KU. And so that next kind of wave of players right now, Austin Alexander, Andre Gibson, both redshirt freshmen at KU, further down the depth chart, but trying to make their way up this year. Chris McCorkle is an incoming true freshman. I do think, though, he's going to profile more to being a safety. And you look at the safety position, and Devin Dye and Jalen Dye, both guys that could graduate at the end of this year. And then you would have like Lyric Rawls, Laquan Robinson, would be seniors in 2026. I think they're juniors this year. Taylor Davis is a sophomore this upcoming season. You'd have Damani Maxon, Darian Jones, Brandon Schmelsley as like freshmen. There's a lot of competition in that safety room, but going to the idea of you could be moving forward playing 3 safety lineups, you're going to need to add more bodies, more depth, more players into that specific position, which I think, Reddick gives you the opportunity to, because that's just going to be another spot on the 2 deep, right? If you're starting 3 safeties, that means you have 2 extra safeties on the 2 deep as opposed to the 2 you were at. So now all of a sudden your depth gets tested a little bit more. And, from that standpoint, we've seen KU play defensive backs when they're young, right? I mean, if you want to just go back to last year, like Jalen Todd was getting in there at the end of the season, right, when he was a true freshman. Taylor Davis was playing a lot last year as a redshirt freshman. You go back to like Kobe Bryant was playing a lot in his second year at Kansas. Mello Dotson was playing a lot in the early part of his career at Kansas. So if you're good enough, you'll get on the field early as a defensive back, because you still want to add the weight, you still want to add the muscle. Those things are still important. But if you can cover, if you have good closing speed, if you're causing problems for the opposing quarterback, like, it's maybe more physical of a position at safety than it is corner, but like you can get on the field in a real way early on as well. Now I would expect with Reddick, knowing all of those young safeties and safety competition you have, maybe that's one that takes a little bit longer. With Carter, maybe you can hit the field early again if you have that Blake Harrell type rise early on in your career, but you never know how players are going to come into college, how they're going to adjust, to being away from home, how they're going to take the coaching, or is everything going to click right away, or is it going to take 3-4 years? Everybody's different. Everybody's running their own race, but I think they got 2 good additions here in Carter and Reddick. And as we talked about earlier, hell of a class right now for Lance Leipold and company. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time for Locked on Jayhawks.